Hello, and welcome to Religious Rebels, a podcast where we push back on behavior-based religion, question Christianity's concepts, and seek to find Jesus in the awkward middle way of grace and truth. I'm Christy Lynn Wood. Hey everybody, welcome back to Religious Rebels. It's good to have you here. It's been a while, a long while actually, probably months since we've recorded or you've seen my face. Life sometimes happens like that, and I was really challenged to look at the life that I am living currently and to recognize that I couldn't do everything well. I could try to smash it all in, but then things were not getting done with a quality that I would have liked, and other aspects of my life were not being done well at all. So, podcasting is one of those things that got to take a break. And yet, here I am back, like I said, talking about faith reconstruction for the next few episodes. I'm thinking it's going to be probably 3 to 4 episodes about this. And it should land us right around Christmas or Christmas break. And then we'll see what happens after that if we pick back up again or not. I started a new job and it is taking a little more of my time than I expected, which is strange because it's less responsibilities than teaching, but somehow I don't have the same amount of time. So we will see what happens after the new year if we continue with a season 2 or if we just call it good. So I love podcasting. Don't get me wrong. I think it's amazing. I love this mode of communication and it's something I really enjoy. So we'll see what happens with that. But for the next few episodes, I want to talk about faith reconstruction. We talked a lot about deconstruction, what it looks like to deconstruct. My very intense belief that deconstruction should not be equated with deconversion. I'm actually going to be on a couple podcasts in the next little bit about that and talking about deconstruction and just the process of taking things apart and how it doesn't automatically mean that we deconvert from our faith. So, for the next few episodes, we're going to talk about reconstruction. And if you're somebody who has decided that you've taken apart your faith, but you want to put it back together again, that you want to have a faith system that's based on Jesus Christ, that you want to really look and see what it is to follow Jesus, to have a Christian faith that's based in hopefully truth. What does that look like to reconstruct, to rebuild this faith? And if you've read my book or you've listened to this podcast for a while, you might know that I talk about Legos and how Legos and a Lego set or a Lego creation is kind of like what happened with the Christian faith and how people added Legos to it over the years, and it kind of became this thing that wasn't even really the real deal anymore, and how deconstruction is taking those pieces apart. It's looking at them, it's trying to find original instructions and rebuilding from kind of the ground up. But I recently had someone tell me that they like the idea better of a garden. And so just think about this with me. I am a gardener, not a vegetable gardener. I do not vegetable garden. My lovely mother had far too many gardens when I was a child, and I just was overwhelmed by gardens. And then about the time that I thought as a grown woman with children that I might like to garden, a lovely old man who couldn't really garden very well decided that I should help him with his garden. And once again, just way too big of a garden and overwhelmed. And so now I'm a little bit like gardening PTSD. I am casually considering some like pots or maybe a raised bed. But I do love flower gardens. I love flower gardens and I love old flower gardens that you're trying to remake and design and figure out what's even here. And so as we think about faith reconstruction, let's think about it almost like a garden. So there was this old garden that was overgrown, and you can't even tell what used to be there anymore. And things are growing that are weeds, and there's things that are broken, and there's pieces of the garden that you can't even tell, like I said, are even there. And so when you're taking a garden apart and when you're kind of recreating that garden and you're pruning and you're digging and you're pulling out weeds and you're trimming things back and you're rediscovering plants that you didn't even realize were there, or maybe you're transplanting plants from other areas and you're putting this garden back together again. What do you think about that as you think about faith reconstruction? So we are building things again. We are recreating things again. We are trying to make things beautiful again. And for me, my faith reconstruction has been built around a very orthodox, I guess you want to call it, very orthodox still faith. I'm not progressive. I'm also not conservative. I'm in this awkward middle way of things, trying to find the balance of grace and truth, trying to discover who God really is, trying to discover what the Bible really meant, what it was designed to tell us, things like that. So, not so much pushing into like, this is people's opinions. Either way, I'm trying to find that middle way of like, who is God? And as I've said before, God is who he is, whether we believe it or not. My beliefs about him don't change him. He exists and he is who he is. So I want to discover who that is, who he is, what he wants, what he's said, what he's done, and who that is versus me trying to create a God in my own image, which has happened on both sides of the spectrum with religious Christianity or with more of a progressive liberal Christianity. Same thing happens. So, as we reconstruct our faith, what are some things that we really need to focus on? What are questions that we need answered? And I think that's the thing. And so, in the next few weeks, we're going to talk about these various topics that we have to reconstruct in our faith. As we are building our faith again, we have to deal with these topics. And I don't want you to come into this thinking that I am giving you a formula for how to reconstruct your faith. This is not me trying to tell you what your reconstructed faith should look like. I will share stories about my reconstructed faith and things that I have come to believe. But I really think that this is a personal journey and that if we really are truly looking for the real God, he will reveal himself to us. And I do believe that he's bigger than any one person can comprehend. And I think that he reveals himself differently to different people within the parameters of who he really is. And so I don't want this to come across as a formula or you have to follow these steps. But I do think these are the questions that you have to ask. These are the questions that I've had to ask. And I'm going to share with you just the answers that I've found. And I want you to do your own digging and your own searching. I don't want you just to assume that because Christy said that, it must be true. Also, please try really hard not to just reject what I said because it doesn't line up with what you like. Like, let's just try to have this open conversation here and recognize I'm not trying to tell you this is how it has to be. What needs to be reconstructed? If we are going to reconstruct a faith, and I understand that not everybody who deconstructs wants to reconstruct a faith, and that's fine. I'm not telling you you have to. But if you want to reconstruct a faith, what are the questions that you need to ask? And what are the questions that need answers? Some of our questions that we ask don't necessarily have great answers. And we learn to live in a place where that's okay. And you can say, I don't really know right now. Or I think it's this, but I don't really know. So we need to answer these questions. We need to say, who is God? Who is God? And I think that the real God is very, very different from what many of us have experienced. And I have my experience in very conservative, legalistic, religious Christianity. But many people within various denominations of Christianity have had similar but different experiences with a God who is, I don't believe, real. I've recently talked to people who have come out of very Pentecostal, New Apostolic Reformation kind of churches, and the God that they experienced, although not this strict, rigid, legalistic, conservative God, still had these expectations, still had these systems that he followed, still had these formulas people were trying to follow to get God to do what you wanted. It was still a very rigid, formulaic God, even if it's not the same level of conservative legalism. There's still legalism. It just looks differently. So we need to ask the question, who is God? And what are the things that I believe about him or used to believe about him that are not true? And how can I reject those things? And how can I push into discovering who this God really is? And what if he's nothing like I expect? So that's the first question. We need to wonder about what do we do about the Bible? What is the Bible? How do I read the Bible? How do I understand the Bible? Is the Bible true? Is it all literal? Is the Bible inerrant? That's a huge, big battle right now. People are taking sides on that one. There's a lot of things we need to wonder about when it comes to the Bible and wonder and push into and really reconstruct belief about what that looks like. We need to ask the question, who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Is he God? Is he the Son of God? Is he just a good person? Who is Jesus? Why does it matter? Because you have to ask the question, what does his life and death mean? What was the whole point of his story? What was the purpose of him coming? What was the purpose of his death? Did he really resurrect? There's lots of questions you have to ask and get to the place of like, what do I believe about this? We have to ask, what does it look like to live a life of faith? If I'm going to reconstruct my faith, what does it look like to live in this new life that I'm reconstructing? How do I have a life of faith that doesn't still get sucked into these old rigid ways of thinking or these old formulaic ways of living or these patterns that I used to have? And it's not easy, guys. This reconstructed faith, it's complicated and it's confusing and sometimes you don't really have good clear answers and we learn to be okay with that. And I really think that a huge part of our reconstructed faith is having the ability to sit there in that awkward gray middle space and say, I don't know. I'm going to hold the tension. I believe in this and I believe in this. And they don't necessarily fit together. They don't line up right. It feels like they're opposites. And yet I believe them both to be true. And you find a place where you're like, this is what I believe, but I'm not offended by what you believe. I'm not threatened by what you believe. These are my beliefs. And if you come to a place like me where you have a reconstructed faith, mine is stronger than it was before. The things that I am holding on to, which I have less of them, but the things that I'm holding on to, I'm holding on to with a grip. Like I believe these things about God, about Jesus, about the Bible, about my own humanity, about what salvation means. And those are things that I hold on to tightly. And there's a lot of other things that I hold very loosely, or I just say, I don't know. I don't know. And there's things that you discover that matter, and there's things that you discover that don't matter, that don't need to have a certainty to them. And even in the things that I hold tightly, I've come to the place where I'm still willing to examine those beliefs again. I'm still willing to think about other people's perspectives and opinions. And I'm still willing to go ahead and challenge myself and say, is this really true? Is this really what I believe? And to play the place where you can just your faith and your beliefs can be a little bit flexible because you recognize that God is bigger than we can ever comprehend and more complex and more crazy. And I am much more limited and humanity is much more limited than I ever imagined, than I ever thought of in my very certain fundamental faith. And that's okay. And that's okay. So, as we go through this series on reconstruction and faith reconstruction, I really hope that you will be encouraged. I hope that you will feel supported. I hope that you will feel that you're not alone. And once again, let's just finish with this, but like deconstruction is so important. And the more people that I find who are coming out of these churches, and I'm sure there are good churches out there. Like I know there are good churches. I've experienced a few of them in my life. But there are a lot of churches who believe some really wacky stuff, and they are teaching this wacky stuff as truth. And there are a lot of places that have some really strong, abusive pastors who are teaching and doing some really damaging things. And when I hear about these kinds of places, I just I cringe and I think to myself, we have got to deconstruct. We have got to look at this critically and clearly and say, we can't just accept this kind of belief anymore because there are things out there that are so wacky and so damaging and so wrong. And it's not Jesus. And it's not God. And it's not even biblical Christianity. It's not even historical Orthodox Christianity. It's something else entirely, which has been a problem since the beginning. If you read the epistles and the letters to the churches, this has been a problem since the beginning of the faith. And so it's not something we should be surprised about or horrified about or worried about or terrified of. This is just how it goes. Like we're people that are broken and we're trying to figure out who God is. And there's always going to be somebody out there pointing their finger at you saying, this is the truth. That might be a complete lie. So we'll talk about that in the next few weeks. And thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Looking forward until next time. And until then, keep searching.